It was a cold October night in 1849 when one of the greatest literary minds in history was found delirious, lying in the streets of Baltimore. He was barely conscious, dressed in tattered clothes that didn't belong to him, and muttering the name Reynolds over and over. No one knew where he had been for the past week. No one knew how he got there. And just days later, Edgar Allan Poe, the master of the macabre, the father of detective fiction, and the man who gave us some of the darkest stories ever written, was dead. His last words? "Lord, help my poor soul." What happened to Edgar Allan Poe in his final days? Was it illness? Was it foul play? Or did something far more sinister take place? This is the unsettling, unsolved mystery of the death of Edgar Allan Poe. On September 27, 1849, Edgar Allan Poe left Richmond, Virginia, heading to Philadelphia. He was supposed to edit a collection of poems for a wealthy widow, Mrs. Sarah Elmira Shelton, whom he was engaged to marry. Poe had plans. He had a future. He had just joined the Sons of Temperance, swearing off alcohol, and he was trying to rebuild his career. But then, he vanished. For nearly a week, no one knew where Poe was. He never made it to Philadelphia. His whereabouts from September 27th to October 3rd remained completely unknown. And when he finally reappeared, it was under circumstances so bizarre, so unexplainable, that his death would become one of the greatest literary mysteries of all time. On October 3rd, a printer named Joseph Walker found Poe outside a polling station in Baltimore. He was slumped against the side of a building, barely conscious, shivering and incoherent. His clothing was dirty, tattered, and didn't belong to him. Poe, a man known for being meticulous about his appearance, looked nothing like himself. Walker immediately sent a desperate letter to one of Poe's acquaintances, Dr. Joseph E. Snodgrass, saying, "Dear Sir, there is a gentleman, rather worse for wear, at Gunner's Hall who appears in great distress, and he says he is Edgar Allan Poe. He is in need of immediate assistance." When Snodgrass arrived, he was horrified. Poe was delirious, unable to answer questions, and his speech was nonsensical. He was rushed to Washington College Hospital, where his condition only worsened. For 4 days, Poe drifted in and out of consciousness. He suffered from hallucinations, mumbling fragmented words and phrases. The most chilling of all, he kept repeating one name: Reynolds, Reynolds, Reynolds. No one knows who Reynolds was. No friends, no family, no associates by that name were ever linked to Poe. It was a ghostly riddle spoken by a man on the edge of death. Doctors tried to stabilize him, but medical knowledge at the time was limited. His attending physician, Dr. John J. Moran, gave multiple conflicting accounts of his condition, sometimes claiming Poe was suffering from alcohol withdrawal, other times suggesting a brain fever or poisoning. Whatever was happening to Poe, it was irreversible. And on October 7, 1849, Edgar Allan Poe took his final breath. His last words whispered into the silence of the hospital room: "Lord, help my poor soul." Then, nothing. Poe was gone. And just like that, the mystery of his death began. Here's where things get even stranger. No official death certificate was ever filed. The only recorded cause of death was listed as phrenitis, or inflammation of the brain, a vague, catch-all diagnosis doctors used when they didn't know what had actually happened. And there was no autopsy. This meant that whatever happened to Poe, whatever truly killed him, was lost forever. With no physical evidence, all that was left were rumors, theories, and eerie speculation. One of the most accepted theories is that Poe was the victim of cooping, a 19th century election fraud scheme. Cooping was a brutal practice where gangs kidnapped unsuspecting men, drugged them, beat them, and forced them to vote multiple times under different identities. When they were no longer useful, they were discarded, left to die in the streets. Poe was found outside a polling station. He was wearing clothes that weren't his. He was incoherent and barely able to move. Was he a victim of cooping? Did a political gang abduct him, force him to vote, and then abandon him in the streets of Baltimore to die? Then there's the theory of alcohol poisoning. Poe had a complicated relationship with alcohol, and some believed he suffered from alcohol withdrawal-induced delirium tremens. But here's the thing. Hospital records indicate that Poe had no alcohol in his system when he was admitted, and friends who saw him before his disappearance claimed he had been sober for months. So what if it wasn't alcohol? Some doctors have theorized that Poe may have had rabies. Symptoms like confusion, difficulty swallowing, and sudden outbursts followed by exhaustion align with rabies cases. But there's no record of him being bitten by an animal. Other medical theories include brain tumors, epilepsy, carbon monoxide poisoning, and even syphilis. But none of these explain why he disappeared for nearly a week or why he was found in someone else's clothing. And then, there's murder. Some believe Poe was targeted by an enemy, perhaps even someone he knew. He had made powerful rivals in the literary world, including Rufus Wilmot Griswold, a man who hated Poe so much that he wrote a false obituary after his death, portraying him as an insane drunk. Did Griswold have something to do with Poe's death? Was Poe poisoned or beaten before being left in the streets? And what about Reynolds? Why would Poe spend his final moments muttering the same name over and over? Was Reynolds real? Was it the name of his attacker? A final clue to his death? Or was Poe trapped in some hallucination, his mind unraveling in his last hours? We may never know. Edgar Allan Poe was buried 2 days after his death in a quiet, unremarkable ceremony. There were no grand tributes, no public outpouring of grief. Only a handful of people attended. And then, the worst happened. Rufus Griswold, the man who despised Poe, became his literary executor. He controlled how the world remembered Poe, and he made sure that Poe's reputation was ruined. He published a fake biography, calling Poe a madman, a drunk, a degenerate. And yet, despite Griswold's attempts to destroy his legacy, Poe became immortal. His stories of horror, mystery, and the supernatural only grew in influence. And ironically, his own death became the kind of eerie, unsolved tale that he himself might have written. The mystery of Edgar Allan Poe's final days remains one of the greatest enigmas in American history. A man disappears for nearly a week. He reappears, barely alive, dressed in someone else's clothes. He whispers a strange name in his final moments. What happened to Edgar Allan Poe? Was it a tragic accident? A brutal crime? Or did something even stranger take place in those lost days between Richmond and Baltimore? Maybe one day the truth will come to light. Maybe some lost document, some forgotten letter, will reveal the final, haunting chapter of Poe's life. But until then, his death remains a chilling mystery, a story with no ending, a puzzle that may never be solved. And perhaps, in some eerie way, that's exactly how Edgar Allan Poe would have wanted it. The truth is buried in the past, but we're digging deeper. Subscribe and explore history's greatest mysteries with us.